Hello, good people, but now you know the deal. If the camera angle is off, it's not by design. I am blind and it comes with the territory. Alright, so Nyiko Floyd Shivambu has been booted out of his position as Secretary General and supposedly being redeployed to Parliament. This follows a presser and much speculation on various media that the man is on his way out. So the news was pretty much out before the presser. And yeah, I mean, it was quite anticlimactic, was it not? I mean, I expected at least the presser to cover several issues. But it ended up being one issue. That in itself is quite telling. It means that the president of Umkhonto Wesizwe, Zuma, essentially felt as though, okay, this matter is important enough that it warrants public announcement and the presser, whereas before, SGs would be dropped like flies, you know? You just wake up and it's like, oh, okay, new appointment and redeployment and reappointment and deployment and reappointment, deployment type of vibes, right? But Nyiko Floyd Shivambu came in, stabilized things for quite some time after the elections, and then there was a whole spat. You remember the president's daughter? It's unfair to refer to her like that, I guess, you know. But nevertheless, it seems she has privileges, and I'll get to those soon. Essentially insulted the SG on Twitter, somewhat retracted, eventually retracted completely her ugly outbursts. And we were then told that no, there will be a disciplinary hearing. Right, so from that time onwards, it was evident that there's some tension between her camp, because she now appears to have a camp of her own, and just the general membership of the MK party. I mean, it's really difficult to discern how serious this friction is and how far, wide and deep does it actually go. But you know, she kept a low profile and kept doing her thing, and now and again I saw her even campaigning. She did fairly well and so on and so forth. But clearly trouble was brewing, and Nyiko Shivambu gave his political opponents within the MK party an opportunity to use something against him. Now look, I maintain, as I did in my previous analysis, that you can't crucify a man for going to church. Like, that's the height of hypocrisy, despite what you may think of the church that he goes to or who prays for him. Would I go to Bushiri? Hell no, I wouldn't, right? But it's not, believe you me, that of his shenanigans with South African laws, just it's more spiritual than that, right? It's for my own divinity. Be that as it may, he's a suspect in very, very serious crimes. Right? So, long story short, Shivambu then goes to several media and says that he had been given a directive by the president to engage on political matters. And then he took the opportunity to go to church. I think what aggravated that situation was the fact that he tweeted about it. But it's his personal account. But we can't be disingenuous, right? I mean, there is a blurring of lines between using your account for personal things versus professional things versus so on and so forth, where politics are concerned, right? If you're holding a position such as the one that Nyiko's holding. I mean, ordinarily, I don't think it's actually a problem, especially if it's clear that you're using your account to express your own views and so on and so forth. But as a politician, it's tricky because at what point in time do we, as the public, perceive you to be speaking and expressing views of your office versus those that you hold in your personal capacity, right? And I think that's the fine line that Jesse number 10 found himself having to navigate. It's unfortunate. I don't think it warrants a redeployment, a removal from the SG, but apparently the National High Command of the MK Party, in its wisdom, thought it was. But here's the problem. The problem is that they are referring to the disciplinary code of conduct. I believe it's point number J, which basically speaks to international trips and participating in activities. Conveniently, a point or two above that is the insult one. And that warranting some type of discipline if you found to be in convention of the constitution and the rules of the party, right? But are we to assume as the public that the National High Command therefore stood in place for the disciplinary committee? What about the National Disciplinary Committee? What about the appeals process? Did Shivambu subject himself willingly to this, to say that no, let's void the disciplinary processes and just have this as a meeting? If so, why? Right? Where does this place, in terms of precedent, the Duduzile Zuma matter? Right? We were told that, there's a disciplinary hearing or processes that are unfolding in respect to that matter. So how come that wasn't subjected to a national high command? Right? So it raises very important questions. This is nothing to be poo-pooed and to be laughed at, as the MK party leadership seems to be trying to. I get it. It's about making it seem as if everything is cool and so on and so forth, and playing it as though that it's a decisive party. Apparently, it is. I would tend to agree with it. But there are more fundamental issues that this occurrence, this decision, this process brings to the fore. And that you cannot just explain away with a simple 30, 40, 45-minute presser. And then there's the issue of journalism. Like, goodness. Like, what on earth is going on in newsrooms? Was there not a journalist who could have asked about these contradictions? Is it because they did not study the constitution of MK Party and therefore they were caught flat-footed. But it's also just common knowledge about which high-profile individuals within MK Party are being disciplined. And common sense would tell you that, hey, I can quickly make a comparative analysis and ask a question. Right? Is there favoritism going on here? What's going on? So journalists really dropped the ball when it comes to that, because they wanted to veer off and talk about other issues, when the issue, what they could have dealt with, was just there in front of them. And also, just another obvious question you would think for a journalist is, now that Mr. Shivambu is being redeployed to Parliament, is there going to be a temporary appointment as SG? When will there be a new SG? But more than that, I just think, though, like simple questions such as, how come was Shivambu not subjected to normal disciplinary processes where this can be ventilated, right? And was there consideration for this? If so, how come this was not done? Those are more salient and pertinent questions to be asked. At least in my little mind, that's what I would have thought. Look, I don't think this is the best decision for the MK Party. I think that an internal squabble has essentially bubbled to the surface to a point where now there needs to be an intervention. I think this was a compromise of some sort, but here's the big problem. Shivambu is going to be underutilized in Parliament. What role do you foresee him playing in Parliament? Right? Because is he going to be seen as someone who's stepping on people's toes, in Parliament? Will he be overreaching when he tries to assist the deputy president of the party who's leader in Parliament? Will he be told, no, this is not your role? Or, no, you're making too grand inputs in National Assembly. Your debates, no, maybe this is not how we envision it to be. You need to give the chief whip a moment to shine. Like, it's just messy. It truly is. And it's not really such a great decision, considering that the very same constitution allows for fines, it allows for suspension and various other remedies. And given that some precedent has been taken, they could have also just creatively thought of something else. Right? I think Shivambu definitely erred in the fact that he just simply made the assumption that in his position as SG for a growing political party, he could go and visit a person as controversial as Bushiri. Right? Yeah, granted, I mean, there are several controversial people in all these political parties and in various churches. But at the same time, I think the point that ultimately killed his side of the argument was the fact that Bushiri is facing extradition, possibly, right? There has been judgment in that regard. And that is what the MK Party then referred to in its presser, which is an important point. But does that warrant him being kicked out, particularly at the expense of the political program of the organization? leading up to what you are referring to as a revolution, right? Am I saying the individual is greater than the whole? Definitely not. Could he have been penalized in a more creative way? Definitely. And also there's this whole thing of it being a first offense, at least as far as members of the public know. And what about rules for thee and rules for me? Because tutuzile, that matter seems to have gone quiet. Yes, we understand that you don't subject a person to public discipline and blow-by-blow account and so on and so forth. But where does that stand in relation to all of this? It just raises so many things, right? So, in conclusion, I mean, I don't think that it's going to lead to a breakdown of the party as naysayers would have you think. Definitely not. It will upset some of the intelligentsia because they recognize that it's not such a big deal. It really isn't. And then hence maybe that's why there was a pressure, right? To give off that kind of vibe that a decision has been made and we recognize that it potentially could be a detrimental one. But point is, if you're going to make a presser, then you're going to bring the goods. And there were no goods in that presser. So yes, the intelligentsia is going to be quite annoyed and irritated by this. Now, that was the stick. The question will be, what's the carrot, right? And how is there going to be a reconciliation and a sorting out of differences between some of these prima donnas within MK and various other parties on the upper echelons, right? There needs to be that thing, and that's where we need to focus on from the outside, at least some of us, to see that, okay, now that they've taken such a significant decision, how do they spend the next few months illustrating that, okay, they've indeed gone past this is no longer an issue, but also how are they going to use Shivambu in terms of his abilities fully, right? I think all of these questions are pertinent. And then, of course, how do they resolve the foundational questions, emanating from this drastic action? That's my take. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree?